The sun was slowly rising over the savanna of Mazambo National Park, painting the sky in vivid shades of orange and gold. Dewdrops on the tall grass sparkled like diamonds. Jabari Okafor, the park's chief ranger with 30 years of experience, watched the spectacle from the veranda of his home. A cup of strong tea warmed his worn hands. At 62, the ranger was still on active duty, though only a few months remained until his retirement. His dark eyes, framed by deep wrinkles at the corners, had seen both the beauty and the brutality of the wild, the nobility and the treachery of human nature. A scar crossing his left eyebrow, souvenir from a clash with poachers 15 years ago, stood out on his dark skin whenever Jabari frowned, remembering the old days. He recalled how hard it had been to restore the lion population after a massive wave of poaching in the 1990s. He and his team had spent days and nights patrolling the territory, installing camera traps, tracking the movements of prides. They rejoiced at every newborn cub and mourned every loss. Things were better now, but the threat never truly disappeared. Jabari finished his tea, grabbed the backpack he had prepared the night before, and headed for the battered jeep that had served him faithfully for the past 5 years. Today's mission was important. Scouts had reported a group of armed poachers who had infiltrated the park the previous evening. According to informants from a nearby village, the group was planning to hunt rhinos. On the black market, rhino horn was worth more than gold. "Be careful," said his wife Amara, stepping onto the porch to see him off. Her once coal-black hair was now adorned with a noble silver, and the skin on her hands, once smooth and firm, had become lined with age. But her eyes still shone with the wisdom and love Jabari had fallen for 35 years ago. Over the years, she had grown used to the dangers of his job, but still worried each time as if it were his first mission. As always, Jabari smiled, adjusting his weathered hat, something he never left behind. It was his talisman, a gift from his father when he had just started working at the park. Amara stepped closer and adjusted the collar of his khaki uniform. "Nuka said they're dangerous, armed with rifles and familiar with the terrain," she added, referring to one of the informants. "We'll be careful," Jabari replied, kissing her forehead. "I'll be back by evening, I promise." At the park's operations center, located in an old, colonial-era stone building, 6 rangers had already gathered. Young Kobe, who had joined the team only 3 months earlier, was nervously twisting his cap in his hands. His dark skin glistened with sweat, betraying his anxiety before his first serious mission. Beside him stood the experienced tracker, Tambo, with characteristic initiation scars on his cheeks from tribal rituals. Silent and observant, he could tell an entire story from faint tracks in the soil, be it man or beast. Sharpshooter McKenna was checking her gear, her slender fingers confidently moving over her weapon. She had joined the team 5 years earlier, straight out of military service, and had quickly earned the respect of even the most conservative male colleagues with her professionalism and composure in critical situations. The 2 other rangers, Zola, with a smooth-shaven head gleaming under the lights, and Demba, whose massive frame contrasted with his gentle voice, were checking radios and GPS units. The operation was led by Jabari's deputy, 40-year-old Adebayo, who had worked at the park for 15 years. A dark burn scar on his neck was a reminder of the fire from which he had rescued 3 wounded animals at the rehabilitation center. Adebayo commanded respect with his very presence. "The poachers are moving toward the northeastern sector," Adebayo said, pointing at a large map spread across an old wooden table. His finger stopped at a region where the territories of 3 lion prides converged. "Our scouts report 5 of them, all armed with modern weapons. They're most likely after the rhinos, but may also target lions." He looked around at the assembled team. "We'll split into 3 groups. Jabari and Kobe will take the central route. Tambo and I will flank from the northwest. McKenna, Zola, and Demba will form a perimeter from the east. Maintain constant communication. If you spot them, don't be heroes. Wait for backup. Jabari felt an unusual tension. In 30 years, he had conducted hundreds of such missions, but something about this one made him uneasy. Perhaps it was the looming retirement and a subconscious fear of failure, or the conversation with his wife earlier. Or maybe it was the strange dream he'd had the night before, about a lion pride surrounding him during a nighttime patrol. Remember, our main goal is to apprehend, not to kill, he reminded the team before departure, as he always did. These men must face justice. Be extremely cautious. They know we're coming, and they'll be ready to fight. 3 jeeps rolled out toward the interception point, raising clouds of red dust. The sun was already high, and the heat was becoming unbearable. The landscape shifted. Thickets of acacia gave way to open plains, where lone trees stood like umbrellas scattered across the horizon. An hour into the journey, Tambo, driving the lead jeep, spotted the first signs of poachers. Broken branches, military boot prints, cigarette butts. The team left the vehicles hidden among the trees and continued on foot, moving as silently as possible through tall, golden grass that reached their waists. Jabari and Kobe led the way along a barely visible trail made by animals. The young ranger kept glancing around nervously, his hand constantly drifting toward his pistol holster. Jabari motioned for him to calm down and focus. In the silence of the savannah, every sound seemed louder. The rustle of grass underfoot, the chirping of insects, the distant call of a bird. As they neared a small grove of acacias ahead, the veteran ranger felt a growing unease. "Hold on, we're almost there," Adebayo's voice crackled through the static. The firefight had been brief, but intense. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and shouts. Adebayo's team flanked from the side, cutting off any escape route. McKenna fired a precise shot, hitting one of the poachers in the leg. He dropped his weapon and fell. Anaha, realizing the hopelessness of the situation, tossed his rifle and raised his hands. But 3 others still hid somewhere in the brush. Jabari gave first aid to Kobe, tying a makeshift tourniquet from a piece of cloth, then continued the pursuit, crouching and moving swiftly between the trees. The sun burned his eyes. Sweat poured down his face. He crept forward cautiously when he spotted movement to his left. A shadow flickered between the trees. He turned sharply, raising his weapon. But it was already too late. The gunshot came from too close, like thunder from a clear sky. Jabari felt the impact like a powerful shove to the chest. A hot wave of pain surged through him. He knew he'd been hit. Black spots danced before his eyes. With the last of his strength, he pulled the trigger. His bullet found its mark. The poacher cried out and staggered back. A sharp pain pierced Jabari's chest. His legs buckled beneath him. The ground seemed to vanish, and the old ranger collapsed onto his back, staring up into the endless blue sky. He could hear the shouts of his teammates, pounding footsteps, more gunfire, but the sounds grew distant, as if he was sinking underwater. "Jabari, stay with me." Adebayo's distorted voice reached him. His friend's face blurred, turning into a smudge of color. "The helicopter's on its way." Jabari tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped his throat. A metallic taste filled his mouth. The last thing he remembered was the bright blue sky above, the shadow of a lone eagle, and a strange sense of peace spreading through his body as darkness crept in. News of the chief ranger's critical injury spread through the park like wildfire. The operation ended successfully. All 5 poachers were captured, but the cost was high. The medical chopper arrived 40 agonizing minutes later. During that time, Adebayo and McKenna tried to stop the bleeding and perform CPR. The doctors who came with the helicopter worked on Jabari's body right there in the clearing, trying to restart his heart. The jolt of the defibrillator made his body jerk, but the heart monitor showed a stubborn flatline. After 20 minutes of failed attempts, the lead doctor shook his head and announced the time of death. 2 bullets had struck too close to the heart, rupturing major vessels. The blood loss had been critical. Adebayo, covered in his friend's blood, stood frozen, watching them load Jabari's body into the helicopter. Tears streamed down his dark cheeks. But he made no move to wipe them away. The loss of a commander, mentor, and friend was too sudden, too cruel. Adebayo personally informed Amara of her husband's death. He arrived at her home as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the savannah in red-orange hues. She stood on the porch, as if sensing something was wrong. One look at Adebayo's face told her everything. "Where is he?" she asked quietly, her voice unnaturally calm. "In the hospital. We'll bring him home tomorrow." Amara received the news with quiet dignity, though her eyes betrayed a bottomless grief. "He died protecting what he loved," she said, gazing at the sunset. "That's how he always wanted to go." Their children, 30-year-old Bakari and 28-year-old Naila, arrived the next day. Bakari, a doctor at a city hospital, was the first to arrive. Tall, with the same piercing eyes as his father, he couldn't believe it had happened. "I need to see him," he demanded the moment he entered the house. Jabari's body was brought home that evening, placed in a specially cooled casket. Bakari stood over his father for a long time, staring at the peaceful face, as if searching for signs of life. Naila arrived late at night. She worked as a teacher in a remote village and had traveled by several buses. She resembled her mother but had inherited her father's spirit, strong and fearless. She didn't cry when she saw him. She simply gripped her mother's hand tightly, as if trying to pass some of her strength to her. "He looks like he's just sleeping," she whispered sadly. The funeral was scheduled for the 3rd day. All the rangers, park staff, local villagers, and even directors of neighboring reserves came to pay their respects to the legendary protector of the wild. In local tradition, funerals were not only moments of mourning, but celebrations of the life that had been lived. Many brought flowers and acacia branches, Jabari's favorite tree. The casket was placed on a rise beneath a massive baobab at the edge of the savannah. This ancient giant, older than the memory of any European footstep on the land, was Jabari's favorite place to reflect. It was here that he often greeted the dawn, watching the wild awaken. A local priest, dressed in traditional robes, gave a speech about bravery, dedication, Jabari's love for nature and people. Amara sat with their children in the front row of makeshift benches set under the open sky. Her face was hidden behind a black veil, but it was clear how tightly she held her children's hands. Adebayo stepped onto a small platform and began to speak about his friend and mentor, his first days in the park, their shared missions, the time Jabari saved his life during an attack by a wounded buffalo. His voice trembled with barely restrained emotion. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the savannah, a mixture of a growl and a moan. The mourners turned and froze in shock. A massive lion with a dark, nearly black mane was approaching the ceremony site. The sun shimmered across its powerful frame, muscles rippling under golden fur with every step. Many panicked, running toward their cars, shoving and shouting in fear. The strangeness of the situation lay in the fact that the lion showed no signs of aggression. He didn't crouch in preparation for a leap, didn't bare his teeth, didn't lash his tail. On the contrary, he walked slowly, with a certain dignity, as if he too were a participant in the ceremony. Stopping not far from the coffin, the beast let out a deep growl and took another step forward. People held their breath, expecting an attack, but the lion simply looked at the coffin, as if understanding what lay inside. "Don't shoot," Adebayo commanded, mesmerized by the unusual sight. In 30 years of working in the park, he had never seen such behavior from a wild lion. People watched in amazement as the lion approached the coffin and lay down beside it, resting his massive head on his paws. His amber eyes were fixed on the wooden box containing the man's body. He paid no attention to the people, as if they didn't exist. "What's happening?" someone from the crowd whispered. No one could explain such behavior from a wild predator. The priest, recovering from the initial shock, hesitantly continued the ceremony, frequently glancing at the lion, who remained motionless. Some of the locals began whispering about ancient beliefs, according to which the soul of the deceased could inhabit the body of a lion, or that the lion had come to bid farewell to a worthy warrior. When the ceremony ended and the priest announced the final farewell, 4 rangers lifted the coffin to lower it into the prepared grave. And then something incredible happened. The lion sprang to his feet and let out a thunderous roar that made even the bravest rangers step back, dropping the coffin, which landed with a dull thud. The beast stood between the people and the coffin, baring its massive fangs. Each time someone tried to approach, it growled menacingly. "What is happening?" Amara whispered, peering at Adebayo through a dark veil. Why wouldn't he let them bury Jabari? No one knew what to do. No one dared to shoot the lion. Firstly, it was a protected park, where every lion was under the law's protection. And secondly, there was something so unusual in the lion's behavior that even the most seasoned hunters were hesitant. The lion did not leave and continued guarding the coffin. Time passed. The sun tilted toward the horizon, painting the savannah in bloody red hues, and the situation remained unchanged. Oddly, the lion showed no aggression toward people. It seemed he simply didn't want Jabari to be buried. "Maybe he senses something," Bakari said uncertainly, watching the lion's behavior. "I've read studies about how some animals can perceive phenomena beyond human senses." Nyla, standing next to her brother, closely examined the lion. "Look at his right paw," she said. "There's a scar, quite old." Indeed, on the lion's right front paw, there was a long, healed, but still visible scar, as if a memory of an old wound. After 2 hours of failed attempts to drive the lion away without harming him, Bakari proposed an unexpected solution. "I want to examine my father's body, right now." Many thought it madness, but the young doctor's voice carried such determination that Adebayo supported the idea. "We'll create a safe corridor," he said to the rangers. 4 rangers with tranquilizer rifles formed a protective perimeter, and the coffin was carefully lifted and transferred into a nearby jeep. To everyone's surprise, the lion didn't interfere. He followed the procession at a close distance, never taking his eyes off the coffin. Jabari's body was taken to the park's medical center, a small but well-equipped building on the edge of the administrative complex. The lion remained outside, lying by the entrance like a sentry. Bakari, along with the local physician, the elderly Dr. Mumba, opened the coffin. In the room, lit by bright medical lights, Jabari's body appeared completely lifeless. His lips were blue. His skin had a waxy hue. Dr. Mumba began the examination under Bakari's insistence on a full assessment. He checked the pupils, listened to the chest with an ultra-sensitive stethoscope, checked the pulse on the neck, wrists, and even behind the ear. Then something happened that stunned everyone present. Dr. Mumba, while checking the pulse at a special spot behind the ear, suddenly froze. His hand holding the stethoscope trembled, and his eyes widened. "Impossible," he whispered, but then pressed the nurse call button and shouted, "Resuscitation equipment, now!" Moments later, 2 nurses burst into the room, pushing a cart of equipment. The doctor, breathing heavily with emotion, announced, "He has a pulse. Very weak, barely detectable, but it's there." It was an extremely rare case of so-called lethargy or apparent death, a state in which a patient's vital signs are so faint that standard methods failed to detect them. Jabari's heart was beating so slowly and weakly that a regular check couldn't pick it up. Only the special stethoscope and Dr. Mumba's decades of experience allowed them to detect the faint signs of life. "He must be taken to the capital hospital immediately," Bakari commanded, already taking off his jacket and rolling up his sleeves. "Prepare a saline IV. We need to restore circulating blood volume." The news spread instantly among the people waiting outside. Upon hearing of the miracle, Amara fell to her knees, thanking God and all the ancestors for this incredible twist of fate. Jabari was urgently airlifted to the capital hospital in the same helicopter that had brought the medical team. There, he was connected to life support systems, underwent complex surgery to remove bullets and repair damaged tissue. Jabari's condition remained critical for several days. Doctors gave cautious forecasts, warning that even if he survived, there might be serious neurological damage due to prolonged lack of oxygen to the brain. But a week later, something happened that doctors could only call a miracle. Jabari opened his eyes. At first, he couldn't speak or move, only stared at the world around him with a dazed look. But with each passing day, the ranger's condition improved. 2 weeks later, he was already able to speak single. Jabari shook his head, trying to process what he'd just heard. "That's incredible. A wild lion came to the funeral?" "He didn't just come," Adebayo interjected, the friend who had visited him daily. "He lay beside your coffin and growled at anyone who tried to get close. Then he followed us all the way to the hospital." "What happened to him after that?" Jabari asked. "He stayed near the medical center until the helicopter took you away. Then he vanished, just as suddenly as he had appeared." The story sounded so unbelievable that Jabari initially thought his friends were exaggerating to cheer him up. But then they showed him photos and videos from the funeral. There he was, a massive lion with a dark mane lying next to the coffin. Recovery was slow, but steady. A month later, Jabari was strong enough to return home. He was welcomed as a hero, not only for his years of service and protection of wildlife, but for the astonishing story of his return from the brink of death. News of the ranger miraculously saved by a wild lion spread across the country and even made international headlines. Journalists besieged Okafor's house, eager for interviews and photos, but Adebayo and the team made sure no one disturbed the recovering ranger. In the evenings, Jabari would sit on his porch, watching the sunset and trying to recall something important. There were strange gaps in his memory, after effects of oxygen deprivation, as the doctors had explained. But he felt like he was missing something deeply significant, something tied to that mysterious lion. One morning, as he finished his tea and watched the sunlight play on drops of dew, Jabari suddenly saw that lion. The predator stood at the edge of the savannah near his house, majestic and calm. His dark mane swayed gently in the wind, and his amber eyes seemed to look straight into Jabari's soul. Jabari rose slowly, leaning on his cane. He still couldn't walk unaided. The lion didn't move. He simply stood and watched. And then, like a flash of lightning, a memory burst through Jabari's mind, one he had buried deep for years. 8 years ago, while patrolling a remote section of the park, he had come upon a heartbreaking sight, a dead lioness killed by poachers. Next to her cooling body sat a small cub, whimpering in pain and hunger. The poachers had wounded him too, leaving a deep gash on his right forepaw. By protocol, Jabari should have called in the rescue team to take the cub to a rehabilitation center. But that day, the storm had knocked out communications. Leaving the cub alone would have been a death sentence. He wouldn't last a day in the savannah, easy prey for hyenas or other predators. Against all rules and reason, Jabari had taken the cub with him. He hid him in an abandoned ranger's hut on the park's edge and nursed him back to health for months, tending his wounds and slowly teaching him to hunt small prey on his own. No one, not even Amara, knew about it. When the young lion grew strong and could hunt, Jabari released him back into the wild, in the same region where his mother's pride had once lived. The last time he saw the cub, now a young lion with a scar on his paw, was 5 years ago, vanishing into the tall grass of the savannah. Now, staring at the powerful lion before him, the one with the unmistakable scar on his right leg, Jabari realized the astonishing truth. The beast that had saved his life was the very cub he had once saved from certain death. "I guess we're even now, my friend," the old ranger whispered. He could have sworn the lion gave a slight nod before turning and disappearing into the tall grass with regal grace. Jabari stood there for a long time, leaning on his cane, watching the predator vanish into the wild. A faint smile played on his lips, and tears shimmered in his eyes. That evening, sitting by the fireplace with Amara, Jabari told her the story of the lion cub for the first time. She listened without a word, her breath held, and stared at the fire for a long while afterward. "So now you're square," she finally said. "You saved his life, and he saved yours." "Nature is amazing," Jabari replied. "We often underestimate animals, thinking they act only on instinct. But sometimes they show a memory so deep. Can we even call it gratitude? I don't know." Jabari Okafor retired 2 months later during a ceremony attended even by the Minister of the Environment. He received the nation's highest award for conservation and 30 years of impeccable service. But to him, the greatest reward was the quiet knowledge that kindness always comes back, even if it takes years. Adebayo took over as head ranger, carrying on his mentor's legacy. Jabari didn't move to the city like most retirees. He stayed near the park, mentoring young rangers and sharing his wisdom. Sometimes, on especially quiet nights, when the moon bathed the savannah in silver light, a distant lion's roar echoed toward Jabari's home, and the old ranger smiled, knowing his savior was still out there, watching.